Day 1 of the April 99 7-day retreat in Springwater. A chilly morning, cloudy, and then suddenly sunshine and clouds again. And wind and breathing. Heart beating. Are we here? Are we here in all simplicity? On the first day of a retreat, we usually talk about a new kind of listening. Meditative listening, if you will. Put a word to it. And we also say a few words about authority, creating authority, fighting authority, wanting authority. Attaching to it. That's sort of the latter part of the talk. At the beginning, what is listening? How do we listen? There are many people here who have been to a first day of a retreat many times. And it's always something about listening in the talk. So, right now is the mind, the thought saying, oh, this is the same talk again, I've heard it before. If I hear it so many times, the mind will go stale. Is there this kind of attitude? Then we can't listen. Be present without attitude. Is that possible? Because as long as there are attitudes in the mind, what I want, what I don't like, what I have heard, and the projection of that, and the reaction to that, then there is not this freedom of being here with what is here, whether it's words or no words. And it's always new. It's never ever the same. That's the beauty of this moment. New listening or meditative listening is not something anyone can give to us. And it's much more difficult to talk about that or to to bring it close than to mention all the stuff that are in its way, that is in its way, all the obstacles to free and open listening. We can be more in touch with the obstacles at this moment in time than try to get open listening. That's a futile attempt, going after that, wanting it, picturing it, conceptualizing it. But to begin to be aware of the movement of wanting something, imagining it, the whole physical being going for it, to become aware of that movement of wanting, expecting, is the first step of a new listening. Being aware of all the movements of body-mind, habitually running and closing, tightening, obstructing. Simple being here with what is here. The sound of a motor. I don't know whether it's the sound of a motor. We communicate with each other, so I'm using words, but this is not a word. It's not a visualization, even though a visual image may arise of a truck up the hill or down the hill, or whatever motor this mind may imagine. But the picture is not this whoa. Even though pictures happen all the time, words come up to this word-inundated mind all the time. So to become flexibly, openly aware of words arising as the senses take in impressions. The word arising, the reaction to the word, the association. I like this, I don't like this, this reminds me of such and such. The constant, or almost constant occupation of the mind with words and pictures of memory and anticipated future. And as the mind is so occupied with picture and memory and all the emotions and sensations that go with pictures and memories, as this organism is so occupied, it cannot listen in all simplicity. Or can there be a beginning of listening to the occupation of this body-mind with its history, its memory, its feelings, and the stories that arise out of that, and the feelings and emotions that are triggered as we think of ourselves, our life, or the life of others. Begin to aware it freely, spaciously, without judgment, without resistance, and so opening up to a new kind of listening. What's happening inside and outside of a human being like you and me. If I come here to a talk and there's something I really want to hear, I want to hear something that confirms me in my beliefs, makes me feel more comfortable, more comforted if I want something to happen, can I listen freely to what is being said and the hum of the furnace? No. Mind and body are busy with expecting and wanting and anticipating. Those are just like a setup for closing and for disappointment. Because what is being said may not be what I want to hear. It may be what I don't want to hear. Stuff about myself as we are from moment to moment, unadorned by imagery. This is what talks are about in meetings. To begin to see ourselves, maybe through the words of others, through the mirroring words of others, as we are. And also to become aware how much we live in pictures of how we would like to be, how we think we are, and the amazing attachment to those pictures and ideas of how we think we are or ought to be, or how others ought to see us. Talking too quickly, because listening is not just listening to the words. That's the surface. Listening to the words and the meaning of the words intellectually. But a deeper listening also includes what goes on in this body as words are spoken, reactiveness to it, wanting to shut it out, not wanting to hear that, or wanting to hear more of it, liking it and disliking it, to come increasingly in touch, not just with the intellectual comprehension of words, but one's entire state of being as one listens, or tries to listen, or is unable to listen. That it's why it's good to talk slowly. We're so used to speaking so quickly, and the only way to go with it, pick it up, react to it is from an intellectual track, which is very automated. What we say and how we respond, how we react, it can just go like a ping pong ball across the net, back and forth, without much depth of looking. What is it we're saying? What is it that he is or she is talking about? Are we just trying to protect ourselves or advance ourselves? Produce ourselves? Assert ourselves? Defend ourselves? That's what sort of sits below a lot of our language, below a lot of our conversation. Self-protection or self-promotion. And it doesn't take too much to become increasingly aware of that. To one's amazement, these words we're saying isn't really what we mean. We mean, listen to me, or don't attack me. Be friendly to me. Like me, love me, admire me, or leave me alone. And we've learned to cover this up with conversation and closed below the throat. now sitting quietly listening to a talk about all of this stuff, maybe there happens on its own an opening to the deeper layers of our communication. The wanting, the fearing, the expecting, anticipating, resisting, warding off, and so forth. I can't spell it all out, but each one of us is capable of seeing it for themselves, awareing it in a new way. When there's a real interest in finding out about ourselves as we are, from moment to moment, not needing to fixate it in a new conceptual image of ourselves, but flowing with the discovery in a quiet, well-lit space of attending. That's the beauty of the harmonizing of this building and hill and meadows, forests and sky, the harmonizing of that with, if I can temporarily call it, inner space that allows to be seen, felt, and heard what is going on in a human being in silence, in quiet awareing. So what is said here is not said so the listener will remember it well, be able to repeat it to others. If that happens, it happens. It's not forbidden to remember. We do ask that people not sit and write things here in the hall. Every once in a while someone is so eager to keep it all and writing in a notebook. For one thing, if we're writing, the speaking is much faster than the writing, unless one is a skilled court reporter. And this is another way of not being able to completely listen, because now one is engaged in memory. What did she say and how did she say it? And memory is in full swing. Whereas you may find that in listening openly now and then, or for longer periods of time, as it happens in the course of a retreat, one hears more on day 5 usually than on day 1. Not everyone, not all the time. As one listens openly, one may find afterwards one remembers very little. Because the thinking and remembering mind isn't busy scribbling it all down to try to keep it, which is not the same as open attending. It's closing into a little compartment of keeping, preserving, holding on. If you feel this was a talk I'd like to hear again, that's why we tape it. Have a nice system. Putting this down on wheel to wheel, and then you can get a copy of it. And then when you listen to a tape, Are you trying to remember what did she say? How was it? How did I feel? Or will it be a fresh thing? You may find as you listen to a tape, as many people have reported to me over the years, my gosh, I hardly heard anything or heard very little. I didn't hear this. Did she say that? How come I didn't hear it? Now I can. The mind is more open at that moment, not locked into thinking and evaluating, or what happens frequently on day 1 or 2, 3, whatever, of a retreat, tired, not really able to listen with a different kind of energy. At the beginning of a retreat, that energy may not be available or disperse very quickly. That energy of being here, which is an amazing thing. In being here, attending, listening, noticing, observing, without judgment, without wanting to hold it or push it away. In this kind of awareing, energy gathers. That awareing is gathering energy, which is not the energy of trying to remember or protecting against what is being said. It is an entirely free energy of listening right now, which does not include the distant motor or the rustling of some clothes, calling of birds. The breathing. The breathing is here, isn't it? It is not separate from that humming motor, not separate from the words that are spoken. You may say, oh, I didn't think of it. I had completely forgotten about it. I didn't hear it. But it's there. Very subtly, there's breathing all the time. Only it seems to be excluded from what we're focusing on at the moment. And the more we are focused in the thinking, evaluating mind, the more compartmentalized we get. Feeling separate from what we call the outside. Do we feel separate from the outside? Enclosed, cut off? Thought telling us, I'm here, the airplane is outside of the building, way up in the sky. Not that this may not be so, but the quality of listening, is it cut off because I'm holding on to myself as a separate entity, self-willing, self-protecting, self-asserting? And everything else is outside of that. Is that how it feels? Not to want that state of non-separation. That is part of the self wanting to make itself a better self. But to be in touch with how it feels. To feel shut down, shut off. Whatever. Not to make something up, but to begin to find out how is it right now? And not find fault with it or want it to be otherwise. But let it be in an ever-opening presence. The other day in a small meeting, somebody said, when I was talking in this wise, not precisely the same, I never say precisely the same. Someone said, in hearing you talk, I find ideals arising in the mind of wanting what you're talking about. So your talk, what you say, produces an ideal in my mind. And the triggering of wanting that. Or the feeling I can't get that. It doesn't work for me. May work for her or for others. So can one watch that as it arises and not believe in it, that it's telling us the truth? That an ideal arises is an interesting phenomenon to be observed and understood. But the talking that is going on here about listening without a feeling of separation, or seeing and feeling the separation, paying attention to it, is not meant to set up ideals in the listener's mind of how one ought to be. Watch, beware of it, be weary of it. Not to fall into that trap, even though it happens all the time. We see something, hear something, read something, and we want that, or we compare ourselves with it. Do I measure up to that? No, I don't. Yes, I do. I'm good, I'm bad. Which is all not this open attending in all simplicity, without any need or compulsion to bring oneself into relationship with it. And to watch this incredible compulsion in us to bring ourselves into relationship with everything we see and hear. Is that good? Is it bad? Is it good for me? Does it help me? Am I as good as that or worse? Watch it. Discover it. See it for what it is. Movements of the mind which prevent at this moment the listening to the wind, trees moving, people moving, breath flowing. Unintentionally, unrehearsed. So, let me state it very plainly. There's no intention here on my part to establish ideal ways of meditating, of sitting, of being. The interest here is in how we are from moment to moment, and wondering if it can be perceived openly without making that into an ideal. It's a question. Is it possible? to see oneself at this moment, feel oneself react, get angry, get jealous, fearful, to allow it to manifest spaciously, together with the wind in the trees. If there are any questions that come up during a talk, we do not have question periods right in between or immediately after a talk. We have considered it, but the consensus, pretty much the consensus has been leave a talk alone for a while. But questions may be there or may be arising. Bring them up in a meeting, group meeting or individual meeting. Afterwards, you can write it down because you may forget it again. And we will go into the question freshly. Not what I said at the time, that's gone. But right now, what is the question? Let's go into it. You and me, or whoever is there. In open listening and wondering and looking. That's what feeds talks. Is what the questions and confusions in the human mind. They feed the talk. The one who is giving the talk takes on these questions, these confusions, and allows them to work throughout this body, mind, and clarify, and bring it back out in hopefully clear expression. If it's not clear, bring it back so we can look at it again. Maybe change the expression to clarify what's underneath us, all of us. And coming to the second topic of an opening talk, is there authority in this work, the way it has been presented this morning, and the way it will proceed and unfold throughout this retreat? I can say in all honesty, there's no desire here to impose any authority whatsoever on the listeners, on the retreatants. But just a yearning to share in looking, in wondering, and in discovering what is so from moment to moment. And in that sharing, in that communal inquiring, wondering, listening, there is no authority. That would be a hindrance. That's so clear, not just intellectually, but existentially. To stay away from that closing element of authority. So there's nothing for sale here that needs to be bought by you. That's not the point. Even though this mind, particularly in this particular culture we live in, civilization, the way we're brought up, is very authority-oriented and protest-oriented. That goes together. Establishing authority and protesting against it. If you feel like protesting, rebelling against what is being said, look whether there is some authority that has been created already that needs to be punched down. I'm putting it very roughly. Nobody punches around here. But observe, question whether there is a real desire to have an authority one can turn to, so one doesn't have to look or think for oneself, to begin to believe in somebody's word, project things onto her or him, and then at the same time here and there try to knock it down, protest against it. Want to be free of that. Oh, there's so much to unravel, to discover about ourselves and relationship. And one of those unravels, those threads, is the thread of authority. Very strong for some people, depending on one's training, home training, school training, religious training, spiritual training, may have been very authority-oriented, meaning inundated with fear of authority. I may do wrong. They may not approve of me. And with that fear, the desire to appear as though one understood or agrees, all of the stuff which we've been programmed in. Can it come to light? In this bright, even though cloudy place. Cannot help but coming to light as the mind calms down in a calm place and more stuff appears to be seen and understood and left behind. Not forever, but this right now, leaving it behind. It's understood. It has lost its power in the light of awareness. I'm not talking from an ideal place. I'm talking for what is possible for human beings who wonder about themselves and the so-called world out there in silence. Without knowing the answer. We will end here for today.